Good evening and welcome to the summer reading assignment campus read session for prompt number 4, hosted by the Honors College at West Virginia University. I'm Dr. Ashley Watts, Program Director of the Honors College First Year Experience. We are excited to welcome you to our community of learners. Joining us today is Dr. Susan Lance, Director of the Campus Read and Teaching Associate Professor in the Chambers College of Business and Economics. We are using the Zoom webinar platform today. If you have issues with audio or video, be sure to check your personal Zoom settings in your computer's volume controls. If live captioning has been requested, it can be viewed by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen. If live captioning was not requested, a captioned version of this recording will be available on the Honors website. And now let's begin our discussion. So with that, I will turn things over to Dr. Lance.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Susan Jennings Lance. My family makes fun of me and they make up little jokes like Dr. Susan Jennings Lance, as she has ants in her pants and things like that. And we're happy because this is our 4th night and we're getting a little punchy and school's about to start. And so we're getting a little silly, aren't we, Dr. Watts?
Yes, we are. We're on a roll here.
Yes. All right. So tonight we're going to talk about the campus read. Now, I think a couple of people here may have joined us for our discussion of the campus read in previous nights. So this first part will be a little bit of review, but a little review never hurt anybody. As you probably know, our campus read is Yaa Gyasi's Transcendent Kingdom. Probably you've gotten through it or almost through it at this point. And I'm sure you're wondering, what is this deal with the campus read? Well, at many colleges, they have what we call a freshman read or a common read. And basically everybody who is in the college actually, everybody who's a freshman will read the same book, and then they're supposed to discuss it when school starts. And everybody holds hands and sings Kumbaya and talks about it and has a lovely time and learns a lot. And sometimes they discover world peace. We tried to do that several years ago at WVU, have a freshman read where the freshmen read it and we all sat together and learned. And what we discovered was that the books were so good, everybody else on campus wanted in on the action too. So we decided, well, heck, if everybody else wants to join in the fun, why not let them? And so then we started what we now call the campus read, and we invite people from all over campus to join in, other departments, upperclassmen, graduate students. This year we have a bunch of PhD students in the biomedical PhD program who are going to be reading this book as a requirement in their professional development class. Our students in psychology are going to be using the book. Our students in English 101 are going to be using the book. So we're going to have a lot of fun. So I'm sure you're wondering why exactly we choose to do this. Maybe you're not wondering, maybe you don't care, but I'm going to tell you anyway. First of all, we want to introduce students to the intellectual climate on campus. This is a campus, we are intellectual, and we really want students to be part of that. Secondly, we want to facilitate discussion, stimulate curiosity, and provide a platform for deeper learning across disciplines. Basically, we think that it's important to talk about things and to talk about ideas. Many people in academia came into academia because we like to talk about ideas. We want to connect and acclimate students to the new climate of a common intellectual experience. And finally, we want to further West Virginia University's commitment to diverse voices. So, like I said, we all know that the book is Transcendent Kingdom by Yaa Gyasi. And you, I'm sure by now, have discovered that there are many themes in the book. These are themes that people across campus are really paying attention to. We're talking about opioid abuse in public health and in our psychology classes, and we're learning a lot. And so this book is helping inspire more conversation. In our political science classes, in our history classes, we're talking about Black immigration to the United States. We're talking about mental illness within the family, not just in our psychology classes, but in our at our Caruth Counseling Center. We're talking about neuroscience. As a matter of fact, West Virginia University has the Blanchette Rockefeller Neurosciences Center, and it's a big deal. And so we're kind of proud of the fact that we're the forerunners of neurosciences here at West Virginia University. We're talking about sports psychology. We're talking about isolation during graduate school, or what it's like to be a first generation student. We're talking about reconciling science and spirituality, because in this book, obviously Gifty is spending a lot of time thinking about her religious beliefs as a child and thinking about the rationalism of the scientific method as an adult. And she's kind of coming to terms with, do these two things have to be mutually exclusive, right? And finally, we're talking about adverse childhood events. So we're doing a lot of neat stuff. Now, before we go any further, I'd just really, really like for everyone to take a peek at some of the passages that we have chosen from the book that we have been talking about a lot. And I'm wondering if you all could look at these passages. These are actually bookmarks. We used to print bookmarks, but it's kind of hard to hand a bookmark out if you're on a Zoom call. So we're just going to do it this way. But if you could look at these passages, and I would like for those of you who are here with us today to pick one that just really you like, that says something to you, that strikes you in an interesting way, and tell us about it. You can do that two ways. You can jump on the chat and tell us about it. We're happy to have you do that. Or the other thing that you could possibly do is unmute yourself and tell us which one of these you like. So give it just a minute here. So could somebody tell us which one of these that you thought was interesting? Just speak up.
I thought that the third one in was pretty interesting. I think for me personally, it kind of just relates to in my life and sometimes the fear of pushing myself to continue to figure things out when I'm worried about me not knowing even when it's answered or if you find nothing from it. And I think so I just relate to it because I try to not think about what would happen if I don't know, but also the possibility of what you could find out and then pushing for answers further.
Yeah. Sometimes the answers to questions we ask aren't necessarily the answers we wanted, right? And then last night when we were looking at this one, what's the point of all this, is a question that separates humans from other animals. What if the answer to this question is, I don't know, or we're still nothing? Last night, Dr. Watts and I were both saying that when we were in graduate school, we asked that question a lot. What's the point of all this? Why are we here? What are we doing? And I think that students the world over do that. I think that all thinking people often say to themselves, what's the point of all this? So Allison, thank you so much for participating by pointing that out. Who else can give us their quote that they think is really interesting?
For me, I think the first one really struck me the first time I read the book, and that's like kind of my inspiration as far as like walking into college. I feel like everyone has a curiosity about something that they're passionate about learning, and that you kind of have to keep asking questions to remain interested and to remain engaged and to be a lifelong learner, and that becomes everyone's kind of main motivation, is to keep answering questions and to keep finding newer things, to keep yourself engaged with the world around you and to like move forward and make progress with the rest of everyone else around.
Yeah, Hannah, thank you so much. That is the eternal question, though, right? The truth is, we don't know what we don't know. We don't even know the questions we need to ask in order to find out. But when we learn one tiny little thing, a dim light comes on in a dark hallway, and suddenly a new question appears. That's academics for you. That's my whole life. That's what I've been doing my whole entire life. And Dr. Watts, I think, can concur. So thank you, Hannah. I appreciate that. Who else saw something on here that spoke to them? And like I said, you don't have to speak up. You can get on the chat.
I think for me, the fourth one is really standing out. We should have seen it coming, but we didn't see what we didn't want to see. And I think that can get people, in trouble a lot of times. It may be easier to not pay attention to something that you really should be paying attention to, but it's oftentimes easier to just ignore something.
Absolutely. We should have seen it coming. Can you think of examples like that?
Well, in the book itself, I think that speaking to Gifty's brother's addiction, I think that Gifty and her mother knew that it was a problem. And they did try to get help for her brother, but the addiction was really, really, really bad. And so I sometimes I just question if those characters truly knew how bad it really was. Like they knew it was there, but kind of didn't, know the severity of it almost.
Yeah. Or didn't want to.
Or didn't want to. Yeah.
Absolutely. I always think about that when I think about COVID. We should have seen it coming, but we didn't. We just couldn't comprehend it,
Yeah. And you know what, Dr. Lance, talking about COVID, I sometimes think that, there's a lot of talk now about the mental health crisis. And I sometimes feel like we should have seen that coming as well, because with COVID, people were isolated, and we know isolation can kind of lead to feelings of sadness and depression and things like that. So I almost feel like we should have seen that coming too.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. Would anybody else like to tell us about a quote that they really liked or a passage that they really liked? All right, then. Well, I want to tell you a little bit about what we have planned on campus this fall. We have a number of activities that surround the campus read. We're going to have Narcan training on September 6th at the Gluck Theater. We're going to have an art gallery show inspired by the campus read. We're going to have a program on mental illness and trauma within the family that our Caruth Counseling Center will be putting on. We will be doing the Stewart Hall Gallery walkthrough on September 29th. We're very excited because we're pretty sure we're going to have Yaa Gyasi, the woman who wrote Transcendent Kingdom, on campus. We're really excited about this. And we're hoping we're going to have her speak and do a reading. And we're even hoping to be able to get her into a class with about a small group of 20 to 25 people. So if this book really speaks to you, maybe you could actually be in that group. We're going to do a program on spirituality and science, and we're going to bring in our the folks who are our religious studies professors, the bishop of the Episcopalian Church in West Virginia. And then we're putting together a panel on journalists who write about opioid abuse. So we're really excited. So my question is, oh, well, actually, not my question. I also wanted to share with you that I got to meet Yaa Gyasi a few years ago at a conference where she did a reading for another book that she's written called Homegoing. So if you really like the book and you want to read something else by Yaa Gyasi, I highly recommend you check out Homegoing. Now, I'd really like to know, what did you think of the book? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you find it difficult to read? Did you find it easy to understand? Was it too dark? Was it too light? Tell us what you think. It's quite all right if you didn't like it, and it's quite all right if you did like it. Not everybody likes the same thing. So tell me, what were your thoughts? And again, feel free to type into the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself and tell us what you think.
Personally, I really liked the book. The ending I wasn't so sure about, just because I felt like through the whole thing it was building up a lot with her mother along with her brother, in the way that she felt kind of the work she did in the lab was to relate to her brother. But towards the end, I thought that there would be more with her mom, like more of a resolution early on, especially when I think her friend's name was Catherine that started coming to the house to kind of talk to her. I thought from that aspect more would resolve her mother, and kind of at first started to picture her mom having like a better life than towards the end. But other than that, I thought it was really fascinating how most of her life choices, even from so young, she was so responsible, and then kind of that helped take the direction of her life, I felt like, in her work.
Excellent. So you thought it was a good book. Are you looking forward to seeing the author when she comes to campus then?
Yeah, I think it's actually a really cool opportunity, and even though you need to like ask some questions and stuff about it further.
Great, great. Who else has an opinion?
So I actually read both of these for a class last year, and I started with Homegoing. So my
Uh-huh.
perspective coming into this was a lot different because I read her other book first.
Yeah.
And this one was definitely a tone shift just because it followed one character. The other one is like a whole bunch of short stories. And so I
Yeah.
really loved her first book, and I read this one as like a follow-up.
Yeah.
And I thought this one was not as good, but that's because with just I felt like it took so many hot button issues and wrapped it into a book that I felt like Gifty kind of stood no chance, and it was just kind of this hopeless endeavor that she was on, dealing with like one trauma after another trauma after another trauma in a way that made it almost unrelatable, that at some point things do lighten up for most people, or that one thing is resolved before you move on to the next. And so I felt like Gifty stopped trying, and that made me find like a real difficulty in connecting with her as a character, because she sort of just gave up on herself eventually. And I was like, no, like there are other good things and resources, and your work is going well with your mice. And I just felt like, I don't know, it's really difficult to pick like one thing to focus like a thesis on with how many different struggles she had.
Boy, she did have a lot of struggles, that is for sure. In fact, when somebody told me about this book, they were like, "Oh, this will be a great campus read. It's about opioid abuse and traumatic experiences and religion." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, that sounds like an awful lot in one book." But boy, they're all in there. So, so that's cool, Hannah. It's really interesting. I liked Homegoing a lot too, but you're right. This is very different. So, did anybody?
Dr. Lance, can I add something to that?
Sure.
So Hannah, I really appreciate your thought process on this, so I'm really excited for the event with our counselors at the Carew Center. I would love to hear our counselors' thoughts on
Absolutely.
Gifty's sort of like understanding process, healing process, because you're right, there are so many traumatic things that happen to her and her family that at times it does seem almost unrelatable, but and I agree with both Hannah and Allison. Like I was hoping for more of like a reconciliation or a redemption towards the end of the book as well. And that didn't really happen as much as like I was hoping that it would. So it kind of makes me think like when someone is so traumatized and they're trying to figure it out and trying to heal, is there ever a point where maybe you need to just take a little break from that like deep dive into healing? I don't know the answer to that, right? I'm not a therapist, but I'm really excited now for that event with the Carew Center, because those are the types of things that I think they'll be able to speak to.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really think that a lot of the reason that there wasn't a resolution was kind of like to mirror reality, in the sense that like maybe in real life you don't get such clean cut resolutions with people, because kind of her mom didn't really get that with her. So maybe it's kind of like she has to find herself in that sense, and can't, even though she knows she can't get a true resolution with her mother.
That's an excellent point. I mean, some things just end in an ambiguous way. And I think that that's an excellent way of putting it. You don't always get a clean cut resolution. Doesn't mean you don't get a resolution, but it's not always clean and sharp. John, did you like the book?
I enjoyed the parts where they were talking about her life story like before, I kind of got lost at the parts where she was focused on her present life. I kind of struggled with those parts because I didn't really find them as interesting. And I struggled to like understand why they were put in the book till about the end.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes you do question what's the point of what is the point of all this? What is the point of this passage or whatever? Yeah, absolutely. Would anybody else like to comment? Oh, wait, somebody's on chat.
Yeah, we have a comment in the chat there.
I found the book slightly confusing, if I'm being completely honest. And please be honest. It's fine to find it confusing or not like it. I struggled to follow it from time to time, but I really enjoyed it either way. When books bounce like this one, I tend to get a little confused, but that's just kind of who I am, which is not necessarily the book's fault. I agree that having been through all the things she did disconnected me from her as well. Okay, interesting. We had a student the other night who said that too. He said, I had a really hard time bouncing around on this book. So sometimes that does happen with these books. Which is kind of a postmodern way of putting literature together, I think. One thing I want to share with you before we move on here is this. If you follow Instagram, you can follow it's Dr. Lance Announces. I need to fix that. You can follow that on Instagram using this QR code. And I also have a listserv for the Friends of the Campus Read. Okay, so I am going to stop sharing my screen and turn things over to Dr. Watts, who's going to talk a little bit more about the prompt.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. And get to the task at hand here. So we are focusing on prompt number 4, and prompt number 4 is different from prompts 1 through 3, right? Because 1 through 3, we asked you to write an essay. For prompt number 4, we are asking you to do a digital narrative or a TikTok. So it's a little bit different. Well, it's a lot different actually from the others. So I will just read this out loud and then we will talk about it. So prompt number 4 is: one of Gifty's favorite teachers tells the protagonist, the truth is we don't know what we don't know. We don't even know the questions we need to ask in order to find out. But when we learn one tiny little thing, a dim light comes on in a dark hallway and suddenly a new question appears. We spend decades, centuries, millennia trying to answer that one question so that another dim light will come on. That's science, but that's also everything else, isn't it? Try, experiment, ask tons of questions. So what we asked you to do for this quote, again, digital narrative or TikTok, is explain how this quote will influence your time in college. So let's unpack this a little bit. For some of you, maybe you know for sure that this is the prompt that you want to do. For some of you, maybe you're trying to decide. But either way, tell us how this quote will influence your time in college and what kind of drew you to this prompt compared to the others.
I think somebody already told us that she really liked the quote. Was that you, Hannah, maybe? That you were drawn to it originally when you read the book in the first place?
Yeah, I did. I said I liked this quote a lot, and I recognized it from reading it, but especially as we learn, like at new student orientation and stuff, how high up we rank in research programs, just the way that you only continue to make progress in the world and in academia when you continue to ask questions that other people don't want to know the answers to, or maybe haven't thought to ask before. So I think it becomes a really critical piece of just growing as a person and as a society to ask those questions and to seek out that light and to continue to follow it to either an answer or something else then you can check out, because ultimately that's the only way that you can kind of move on, I guess. And that goes for research, for life, for learning. It's kind of overarching, I suppose, but just that you cannot grow, and that's the only way that you kind of make something out of your life is if you work for it.
And Hannah, what is your major? Because you mentioned our R1 status here. What is your major?
I'm going to study forensic examination.
Okay.
So yeah, I went down there. I saw the shoe lab and the ammunition and all the stuff like that. It was a really big factor for
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So Hannah is in a very STEM heavy field, but I also want to point out this prompt speaks to, questioning kind of lends itself to research. So I wanted to just let you all know that we are an R1 institution here. Sometimes the stereotype is that just, science folks do research, but here on this campus, it is STEM, non-STEM, there's research happening in every major. So even if you are studying history, philosophy, music, art, English, yeah, there's research in every corner.
Science, law.
Yeah, so don't be afraid to jump in and get involved. We have a really great Office of Undergraduate Research here too. It's through the Honors College, so we can get you in touch with someone who you could pair up with, a faculty member that you could do research alongside, regardless of major. So other thoughts about how this will influence your time in college?
And again, don't be afraid to use the chat box.
Did anybody pick this one because it was a different modality, right? Like you're like, oh, I get to do a TikTok or a digital narrative. That's me. I'm going to do this one. Did that speak to anybody with that option?
Like, I personally picked this quote because I feel it was the most important into understanding the novel, like, as a whole. Because it kind of frames Gifty's entire arc in the story, in a sense. Because even though she learns this so early on, she struggles to reckon with this throughout the entire novel. Like, she studies addiction in mice to find out, like, to help make sense of why her brother died. And so it kind of is the frame of the entire novel, in a sense.
Yeah, that's a great point.
John. It's the secret. I mean, it's the key. It's the thesis statement for the whole novel, really.
Yeah.
If you think about it. If novels have thesis statements, I'm not sure that they do, but if they did, it would be this. I'd like to, can we look at the TikTok from last year that we wanted to share with folks?
Yep, let me stop sharing my screen for just a second and I'll pull that up.
So last year, the book that we chose was a book called Interior Chinatown. And Interior Chinatown was actually about somebody who grew up in San Diego, I think, who was Chinese American, was Taiwanese American. And it was the interesting thing about it is it had this big whole page long quote about the song Country Roads, right? And about why it's an important song to anybody who has traveled far away from home and that sort of thing. And so we gave a similar assignment. We said, do a TikTok. And by the way, it doesn't have to be a TikTok. It can be just a reel. Some people were a little concerned. They didn't want to put TikTok on their computer or their phone. That's fine. But any kind of video like that, we call them TikToks, but it can be a reel that you do on Apple or whatever. And so anyway, this is one that one of our students did that we just thought was really, really a good example of how you can explain something from a book using something other than an essay. So if you go ahead and show that, Ashley.
Interior Chinatown. The 2022-2023 WVU Campus Read is a novel by Charles Yu. It tells the story of Willis Wu, as he tells the stories of others and himself, painted against Chinatown and its traditions and history. And here is where Yu sets the stage, quite literally. On pages 65 to 66, Wu states, if you didn't know it already, now you do. Old dudes from rural Taiwan are comfortable with their karaoke, and when they do karaoke, for some reason, they love no one like they love John Denver. Maybe it's the dream of the open highway, the romantic myth of the West, a reminder that these funny little Orientals have been Americans longer than you have. Know something about this country that you haven't yet figured out. Wu goes on to say, when he steps up and starts slaying country roads, try not to laugh or wink knowingly or clap a little too hard, because by the time he gets to West Virginia, Mountain Mama, you're going to be singing along. And by the time he's done, you might understand why a 77-year-old guy from a tiny island in the Taiwan Strait who's been in a foreign country for 2/3 of his life can nail a song made perfect about wanting to go home. Country Roads by John Denver, despite how it first seems unusual or misplaced in the setting, is the manifestation of a place where you felt like you belonged. Because, as this book proves, America can be the land where everyone has a chance, but it doesn't mean everyone has a home. And I don't mean you can't buy a house, although for many that was a legally impossible task. I mean that Asian people in America were never welcome, no matter if they just arrived or lived there for generations, whether they assimilated or refused to, and even whether they provided services no one could live without or simply existed. As Wu states in the novel, if someone showed you my picture on the street, how do you describe it? You might say an Asian fellow, Asian dude, Asian man. How many of you would say that's an American? Who gets to be an American? What does an American look like? Somewhere in that haze of prejudice and diluted dreams, there was a song that perfectly described their desire for home, that described their exact emotions of longing for a place of belonging. For me, Country Roads is a metaphysical road to my past, to my roots. It leads to a house, not my own, but my grandparents', a two-story buried in the middle of nowhere, West Virginia. I wish I could say that my defining moment with Country Roads was watching the basketball enter the hoop at the last second, winning the championship. And as I joined arms with those around me, I found my people at WVU. But it wasn't. It was in my dad's new Jeep truck. We nicknamed it Mo. It was listening to the song for the first time, not singing, not swaying, not celebrating. I was listening while going 40 down a country road, and for the first time, I related the pictures and memories of my own life to a song. It was no longer just a song, it was an anthem to a childhood spent on country roads, within the Appalachian Mountains, not along the Shenandoah River, but the Elk. So when I see another person experience that same longing for home, I understand why. Even if you didn't grow up in West Virginia, you can long for a place where all of your memories are interwoven into the roads, along the rivers, and in the trees and skies. When the man in the novel sings a song about wanting to go home, I cannot relate to not feeling home where I am. I am extremely privileged to have always felt that this country welcomes me in some way, but no place will love me, will pick me up and take me back time and time again like West Virginia will. And John Denver was right. All my memories gather round her.
All right. So obviously, that was a very high quality TikTok, or video, but we all enjoyed it immensely. And this is the kind of thing we're looking for. Now that is what we mean by a video or a reel or a TikTok. Like I said, but it doesn't have to be on TikTok. But we also this year included the idea of putting together digital narratives. So if we could go to the one on public art in Guatemala, I took a group of students on a study abroad to Guatemala over spring break last year, and I gave them a similar assignment. So this student did her digital narrative on public art in Guatemala. And if you want to click on it, you have to click through it. I think if you just hit your space bar, Ashley.
Space bar's not working.
Oh, okay. Well, then do what you need to do.
Okay, I'll scroll. I can scroll down. It's letting me do that, but
Can you just click it with your mouse, like click it in the picture?
it won't let me.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
I
If you
apologize.
think of something else, I'll keep trying, but otherwise I'll just scroll down. Do you want me to pause here for a minute?
Well, don't pause for too long because the students have access to it
Okay.
online. We just want to show, though, how polished it can look by just taking photographs and putting text in with them. That was one of my favorite things in Guatemala, by the way, that statue.
That's really cool.
It was the mayor of the city we were in, by the way.
Oh, wow. Dr. Lance, did you get to go into the presidential palace?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah, it was cool. And it was wild because it was one of those places that you hear about in South America where they would stand out on the balcony and be like, and now we will have a speech, you know,
Yeah.
Vita or something.
We're almost to the end here.
Yeah.
There we go. Oh, that's cool. Put on the walls of a restaurant. That's
Yeah,
so-
they were allowed to do that. That wasn't just
yeah. Yeah.
total graffiti. They were encouraged to do it. But anyway, this is another modality that you can use to explain your thoughts about the text. And we decided to do this because we really just felt like we have a lot of creative students who may not necessarily want to write an essay, but want to show their creativity in another way. I teach business communication. That is what my job is. And what I know about communication is that right now we're not all just reading essays. We're looking at videos, we're looking at digital narratives, we're looking at Instagram. So whatever works for you, get it ready and go. Okay. So what questions do you have about you're putting this project together? Do you have questions?
If you haven't had a chance to look at the prompt yet, I would encourage everybody to do that. It's on the summer reading assignment website. I can click into it if there are specific questions, but when you click into prompt 4, it'll give you I'll go ahead and just click into it. But it'll give you the expectation for each kind of letter grade and what you should include, right, to obtain that certain letter grade. So if you choose to do the digital narrative, for example, that must include at least 7 photographs with 3 to 5 sentences of narrative for each one. If you choose to do a video, an A quality video would be at least 45 seconds of information that supports the thesis in a cohesive narrative, right? That's just for the content, but when you keep scrolling down, there's expectations for organization, style, mechanics, and ability to tie ideas to themes in the book. So, oh, we have some things in the chat here.
Okay, so somebody asked to talk a little bit about Adobe Spark Page. So I am going to.
Do you want me to stop sharing?
Yeah, can you
Okay.
see my screen now?
Hold on. Yes.
Okay, you see, yeah, okay. So hold on here. You can see it, but I can't. Okay, so basically this is the website for Adobe Spark Page. One nice thing about Adobe Spark Page is that you can do it on your phone or an iPad or any way that you want to do it, which is nice. Another thing, and that's one of the reasons I chose it. Another one I chose it is you can do it for free currently. Although if you want it to be a little bit more some people would like to pay a small fee to have it be a little bit of a better version, and that's fine too. What I would suggest you do is that you pick out a template, okay? And for the templates, of course, I was thinking along the lines of, actually, these are all like just stagnant, like you can make an Instagram post on them with. But if you download Instagram, Adobe Spark Page on your phone, I think we're in Adobe Express. And yeah, here it is. See, that was Adobe Express. We're going to go into Adobe Spark Page. And basically, you can take their template and just add things, which is very nice. Okay. So as you see, as I'm scrolling through, they're using their template to advertise. Let's go up here to the top. Adobe Spark Page. I'm used to doing it actually on my phone. So like, here's a video.
Hi, this is Mr. Petrokopoulos, and welcome to Adobe Spark. When you get to the Spark homepage, make sure you name your project and then hit Next to continue. You can add more boxes to your timeline by hitting the plus sign on the left. When you click on Layout in the top right corner, you can choose how you want each page to look. When you click on one of the squares in your timeline, you'll see three options pop up on the main screen: icon, photo, or text. After you click photo, on the right side of your screen, you'll see different options of where you can pull photos from. You can use photos you saved to your network drive by selecting upload, or find photos directly online by using the Find Photos link. You can also change the look of your video by clicking on the theme button on the top right corner. Adding background music to your project will help keep the viewer engaged. Make sure the mood of the music matches your intended message. When all your pictures and text are arranged, you can begin narrating each slide one by one. If you mess up, don't worry, you can re-record as much as you want. Just make sure you hold down the mic button when recording. When you're done creating your video, click on the share button on top of the screen. After that, you have the option of sharing the link or downloading the video to your hard drive.
Okay, so that is an example of a Spark page. And like I said, you can use this as an app on your phone. So it doesn't have to be like at a laptop computer or that sort of thing. And there are various templates. You're not expected to necessarily speak on it. You can make it all visual, you can add music, but it becomes a slideshow like this one. And they're fun to watch, they're fun to make if this is of interest to you. Some people don't necessarily find this to be an interesting or entertaining or enjoyable activity. And if you don't, just write the essay. But if you're somebody who can really dig into this, this should be a fun way to express yourself.
There's a question in the chat. Is there a time limit for the video?
I would say don't go over a minute 30. Really, probably a minute to a minute 15 is the most, but definitely don't go over a minute 30.
All right, I'm gonna share.
Having said that, what was the TikTok that we just showed everybody? It'll probably turn out to be 4 minutes.
3:30.
Okay, you can go up to 3:30. How about that? No. because that one was I mean, one of the things about that video was that it did incorporate a lot of interesting information. So I would say don't go over 4 minutes, okay? Yeah. But probably 3:30 is pushing it.
I'm just confused about one of the questions in the prompt being how to connect it to critical thought and learning or the scientific method, and like how you expect us to do that.
Well, what do you know about critical thought and what do you know about the scientific method?
Well, I know there are ways people solve problems.
So I would start by looking them up, okay? Or you could also look up the Dunning-Kruger effect is another good example. Now, I just Googled the scientific method, and the dictionary definition of the scientific method is a method of procedure that has characterized natural science since the 17th century, consisting in a systematic observation, measurement, and experiment in the formulation, testing, and modification of a hypothesis. Now, does that in any way connect to what we're talking about here? Basically, the scientific method involves making observations, forming a hypothesis, making a prediction, conducting an experiment, and analyzing the result. Now, the prompt, if we go back to that, is we don't know what we don't know. We don't even know the questions we need to ask in order to find out. But when we learn one little thing, a dim light comes on in a dark hallway, and suddenly a new question appears. And we spend decades, centuries, millennia trying to answer that one question so that another dim light will come on. That's science. But that's also everything else, isn't it? Experiment, ask a ton of questions. Now, do you see how those two passages connect to each other? I mean, what we're saying about the scientific method is that you have to observe and ask questions, right? And you have to gather evidence and ask questions and come up with a hypothesis and make a prediction, and then experiment and ask more questions, right? Those are the things that you have to do in order to figure out some truth, okay, based on the scientific method. Critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to belief and action. So again, the idea of critical thought is that you're constantly observing and asking questions, because at the beginning, you don't know what you don't know. So you observe, you ask questions, you observe, you ask questions. So what we're asking you to do in this prompt is to take like the definition of critical thought, or take the definition of the scientific method, or take the definition of the Dunning-Kruger effect and explain what that means in terms of this book. How it is that these words about the truth is what we don't know, how does that explain the scientific method, or how does that explain critical thought based on those definitions that you can just Google?
And Dr. Lance, the sentence below that, explain how this quote will influence your time in college. I would encourage each of you to think about how critical thought, scientific method, the Dunning-Kruger effect will influence your approach to college, right? Because the quote is saying the truth is we don't know what we don't know. Try, experiment, ask tons of questions. So when you keep in mind critical thinking, the scientific method of you have a question, you have a hypothesis, right? You organize that in a matter where you could experiment and figure it out, or the Dunning-Kruger effect, how will you kind of use that to influence your approach to your time in college? So you can think about it that way too, and how that kind of all ties together, right? It was sort of Gifty's approach, right? Like she wanted to figure out addiction and the brain and neuroscience and how all that worked together. So she kind of used that approach, right, to try to find out something that really impacted her. So I would think about it in that way too.
Okay, I think we're running out of time. So what other final questions do you have? Okay, do we want to talk about the class, Dr. Watts?
Yep.
All right, so if you enjoyed reading the book, or you enjoy reading, we have a great class for you. I teach it. It is on Tuesdays from 2:30 to 3:20. It is called The Future Campus Reads. It's Honors 219, Section H01. And basically, we're going to take 5 books that have been suggested by a larger group that we're thinking about for the campus read for fall of 2024, and we're going to read them. And the students in the class are actually going to help us decide what books to choose for 2024. So it's a good time. We have a fun time in class. We read a lot of good books, and it's enjoyable. So I really suggest that you take advantage of it and come take the class.
If any of you are interested in adding this class to your fall schedule, I believe that for all of our incoming students, there is likely an advising hold on your student account. So just reach out to your academic advisor, let them know that you're interested in adding a course or adjusting your schedule. And you still have plenty of time to do that. So if you do want to add this class, which I hope some of you will, just please reach out to your advisor to help you do that. I'm going to put Dr. Lance's email here in the chat. And I'm also going to put my email here in the chat. So if you all have any questions after we hop off the call here, please feel free to reach out. I also wanted to let you guys know that, the paper is due Friday, August 25th. The Honors Tutoring Center, it's called the Teswell Learning Center, officially will open on Monday, August 21st. So if you would like any of our honors tutors to review your essay, your TikTok, your digital narrative, you can drop into Honors or Lincoln Hall Monday through Thursday, 7 to 10 p.m. We're also available online. And just have someone glance over that for you before you submit your assignment. And there is a writing studio through the Eberly College of Arts and Sciences that is available for free as well. So you can send your assignment to someone in the writing studio too, if you would like for someone to look over your work before you turn it in. Okay, any final questions we can answer for you before we sign off here?
Hey, it's been great talking to you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on campus very soon.
Yep, echo that. Thank you all for attending this evening's session. Again, please reach out if you have any questions, and we are looking forward to a great year, everybody. Thanks for hopping on this evening. See you really soon. Bye.
Bye.